Alright, continuing with Bridge here. I've got a file folder off to the side here called Shoreline, and I have 7 images in it. One of the nice things about Bridge is that I can rename a bunch of image or a batch of images all at once. So I'm just going to click on the image, hit Control A, notice they're all highlighted. I can also click on the first image, hold down Shift, click on the last image. It grabs all of the images I'm interested in as well. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go to Tools, Batch Rename, and I can call them Shoreline. I'm going to start at 001. I got 3 digits here anyways. I could just put a 1. So you'll notice it's going to rename in the same folder. It's going to move to other folder, copy to another folder. So I'm going to copy it to another folder, and I'm going to fire up the computer here. Hopefully it'll browse to it. And I just got an email message. That's cool. And I'm going to just put it in a subfolder here called renamed. And I'll hit choose, so you see it has the pathway there. It's going to call it Shoreline. It's going to start with number 1. It gives me an example down here. If I want to put spaces in there, I can just put a little underscore afterwards. You can see how it changes the file name. I hit rename. It does its little thing, and what I should find is there is a file folder with all of my images renamed. Just like that. Okay? That's one of the cool aspects of Bridge. Next one, I'm going to use these first 3 images in something called an HDR merge or put together. Photoshop's going to do all the work. You'll notice this one is bright, this one here is dark, and this one is middle. Normally that's the kind of thing you're looking for to make an HDR, which is a high dynamic range photo. So a +1, a -1, and a 0. So I will make sure I select those 3 images. There they are. I will go to Tools, Photoshop, and then you'll see it right here, Merge to HDR Pro. There are other third-party HDR pieces of software that probably do as good or better a job, something like Photomatics. This is just one way of playing with this. So you'll notice all of my images are flat. I'm going to click on it. It's going to say it prefers RAW. I know that, but I want to work with JPEGs because they're faster. So it does everything, and it's going to keep going. I get this screen. This is where I can play a little bit of the color before I'm done. So I always like to bump up the vibrance a little bit and the saturation, but that's just me. I'll maybe look at a little bit of the exposure. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'll say OK from there. It does its thing. It puts it all together and it applies the layers, and I end up with this as my final image. And I will save that to my renamed area, and then I'll close it and I'll open it in Bridge so you can see all of them at once. So there is my 0, my -1, my +1. Here is my HDR image, and you'll notice I have better tonal range in the sky, a little more saturation and range here in the rocks and the water, and overall it's just a bit better of an image. You do need a tripod to do something like this. Generally you don't want anything moving around, otherwise it has a really hard time with it. So there's one way of using a tool inside Bridge. I have one other little treat to show you. I'm going to highlight these 4 images, and you'll notice it's a bit of a panoramic. So again, I'm going to go to Tools, Photoshop, and there is one called Photo Merge. So I'll click on that. It gives me different ways of putting them together. I'm just going to leave it in auto. It's pretty sharp when it wants to do it. Blend images together. I'm going to make sure that's turned on. I hit OK. It analyzes the images, tries to figure out what's where. This can take a few seconds, especially if you have large files. And you can see the edges showing up right here. But by the time it's done, you'll notice off to the side here, it is layer masked all of that automatically for me. So let me just make this a little bit larger so we can see it. I'm going to close off these, move this out of the way, and there is my image. Pretty seamless, actually. If you look, you can't tell where one image starts and the other one ends. The only thing it can't do, obviously, is it can't fill in the missing spots down below. So you either have to clone that in, or you just put a real cool crop on here. Oops, let me go back here and just delete those. Right there, and I can just put a real tight crop in, try to catch as much of the image as possible. Something like that. I even bring it down a little bit more, and then I can just clone in what I'm missing later. And there's my panorama. made up of 4 images of a nice shoreline. Another cool little treat. So let's go back to Bridge for a second. So those are all under Tools, under Photoshop. You'll notice also I'm going to take the shoreline image again, and I'll take those 4 again. I can also go to Image Processor. This is kind of neat. This is a fast way to output your images as JPEGs or change the size of them. So I could resave them here. Say I want to get them ready for the web, but I'm going to do this with an action as later as well. I'm going to save them as a JPEG as a quality 8, so I'm going to compress it a little bit, and I'm going to resize it to fit. Let's go even smaller. Let's go 400 by 300 pixels, and I'll hit OK. And wait a minute, I better make sure I know where I'm putting it. Let's go back in here, and I'm going to create a new folder called 4x6 resize. Okay, so my destination is going to be right here, and let's run it, see what happens. So it does all of that work automatically for me. There it goes. I can get rid of this panorama. I don't need that anymore. And you'll notice back in Photoshop I've got 4x6 resize with a file folder called JPEG in there. And there's my 4 images. I'll bring up some metadata on it. As soon as I can find it, there's the metadata. I'll drag it over here. And it's done its best to get it to the new size of 400 by 300. The original ratio might have been a little bit off, but it's resized them all for me. So there's that. Go back to folders, and I'll make this a long video. I'll try and make it as fast as possible though. Let's go back to shoreline. If I choose these 7 images again. Now I've already written an action in Photoshop, and I'm going to use it under batch. And it's called resize for web, and it's going to make these images 300 by 200. So I wrote it already. I'm going to go through that hopefully later if I have time. And I'm going to choose to put it in a file called resized. I'll just make sure I've got that. So desktop, day 5, student files, resized. And you'll notice it's empty, so I hit choose. And I'm going to say OK. Again, Photoshop does all the actions for me. That's the nice part. So anything that's repetitive, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So now if I go back into resized, I should find my 7 images, and if I've done it right, which hopefully I have, you'll notice they are 300 by 200. So a lot of really cool things going on there. So we've looked at batch. You can run actions, you can do image processor, or you can just shrink images from RAWs to JPEGs or change the size. We've done HDR, we've done photo merge. All of these are available inside Photoshop as well, but it's kind of easier to access them here from Bridge because we can pick all the images we want to put in them. You'll also notice that Illustrator and Fireworks can be accessed from Bridge. We're not really dealing with those, so I'm going to leave that to another day. And that should do it for most of what we need to look at in Bridge. It's a pretty cool little program. Got lots you can learn.